Welcome back to what is our second introductory lecture to the course. And in this lecture, I'll be providing you with some additional instructional information of a basic nature for the course, some things to think about as we go along through the semester. And in the first part of the introduction, we talked more about distance learning and the unique requirements for taking a class via distance learning. In many ways, it's the opposite of a traditional course, where in a traditional course, all the pressure is at the end of the class when you have exams and papers due and the last week or two of class. In many ways, the distance learning class, the hardest period is at the beginning of the class, where you have to come to terms with the technology and the system the course will follow. Okay, and most of that material is in the first introductory lecture, so as part of the second introductory lecture, I'd like to talk about some other issues, including why we study politics, which our first lecture will deal with at great length. We'll also talk about the course itself, some aspects that I think will help you. And thirdly, I would like to talk about how to succeed in college, which is a very important consideration. Regardless of wherever you might be in your studies, it's my goal as a professor of many years and a great deal of experience that you prosper regardless of where you find yourself right now, whether you're a senior or whether you're a freshman or wherever you find yourself. It's my goal and my hope and really my prayer that you will prosper. Okay, let's begin by discussing why we study politics. Well, it's a question that I began to ponder as a very small lad in the North Carolina mountains, because politics to me was very fascinating. Now, everyone is not necessarily wild about politics for many reasons. We see a lot of bad things that take place because of politics. Politics sometimes has a bad taste in our mouths, so to speak. For example, a number of years ago, a student of mine did not make a collegiate athletic team after he had been promised a position on the team. But when the tryout came, the coach said, "I'm sorry, we're not going to need you." And he came to me and said, "Cheek, it's all politics, man. The coach's cousin's son was trying out too or something." I forget all the exact circumstances, but his concern that it was all about politics. What I'd like to suggest is that politics and government are the way and the means of how we do some of the most important things and accomplish some of the greatest achievements in American life. It's not always the case, but politics, when most seriously pondered, most seriously engaged in, should also have a higher purpose as well. Another issue that we should consider when we look at the study of politics is that most Americans have a very high view of their knowledge of some subjects. In a probably apocryphal story that is often told, Barry Goldwater, who was the Republican nominee for president in 1964, gave a speech in which he said something very provocative. And Goldwater himself was a very provocative person. Once in an off-the-cuff speech, he said, "Well, we solve America's problems, we sawed off California and let it float off to the ocean." Things like that. But Goldwater was a brilliant student of politics, on the other hand, and a very long-term and successful senator from Arizona. But unfortunately for him, he was not successful in 1964 when he was a Republican nominee running against Lyndon Baines Johnson, the Democratic nominee. And of course, Johnson trounced Goldwater. But Goldwater, in many ways, was brilliant. For example, he was asked after a talk once, what he thinks the problem with America, and he said something to the effect that Americans think they're experts on three subjects: politics, religion, and sex. If you ask them a question on any of those topics, they'll give you an answer. The reality is, Goldwater said, Americans don't know very much about either one of those three concerns. And so when we take Goldwater's comments, it is an inspiration for us to kind of overcome what we call the limits of our of your and my and our American collective ignorance about politics. What the fancy term I like to use, civic illiteracy, how little we know about the American political system and how it works. And I think that was really Goldwater's challenge. We're going to spend our semester, however, looking just at politics. We'll barely touch upon religion, and I'm not going to touch the topic of sex with a proverbial 10-foot pole. I'm going to stay away from that, and also just plead my basic ignorance of the topic. Okay. Another consideration that makes politics so important, not only it's how we make the most important decisions in our society and our political system, it's also something that we engage in naturally. We go back really to Aristotle and Aristotle's teacher, Socrates, and Plato. And we go back to the ancient Greeks who said we are by nature rational animals and that we like to be together. We like to work together, we like to build community. That we are by our very nature social beings. So politics is something that we engage in naturally and something that is appropriate and good and should have those higher means we talked about. Okay, the last comment I want to make, or last series of comments, relates to college and university studies. For you to succeed, even in a distance learning class, you must put aside part of every day. And that part of that day should correspond with the particular course you're in, course requirements, all those sort of factors, and spend that time. Put it aside. Secondly, you should be very careful and very attentive in how you take notes. There are many strategies of note taking. I encourage you to think about how you want to take notes and then attempt to exert your energy in note taking and doing the very best job you can. For the last 30 years, I've used a system called, and for lack of any other term, the Dartmouth model of note taking. And this Dartmouth system basically contributes to every class, every meeting I go to, because it helps me organize my thoughts. I want to give you some idea of how that system works. For example, you would go to class, and as in the case of our American government class, I'll give you an outline in advance of each class. What you then is take notes following that outline. This would be an example of what that would look like. As you can see, items are numbered, and you would take copious notes following those numbers. Then, within a 24-hour period, you would go to what we'd call the margin area, and you would create notes or summary notes in this area that would help you rethink and revisit the notes that you had taken during the class. You can obviously see how this system would work. It would encourage you not only to take good notes during class, but then to refresh and revisit your knowledge of those notes as you summarize them. This is a great note-taking system. Again, we call it the Dartmouth system. I will try to augment your learning and that system of note-taking by giving you outlines before every lecture. These will sometimes be given in the course of an audio presentation, and sometimes they'll be just within the PowerPoint or some other type of medium. But please make use of these, because I think they will help your overall learning experience. Thank you.